Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I had convinced myself for years that what Megan and I had was a partnership, that my sacrifices, my quiet endurance, my willingness to let her take the lead in our marriage were signs of love, not submission. But as I sat at the dinner table that night, listening to her coolly tell me she was planning to cheat, I realized the truth. She had never respected me. "I'm meeting someone while I'm in Chicago," she said, spearing a piece of salmon with her fork. "I think I deserve a little excitement." I stared at her, waiting for a smirk, for some sign that she was joking. But there was none. She was calm, casual, as if she had just announced she was trying a new restaurant. My grip on the glass tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "And you're telling me this because—" She sighed, as if my reaction was an inconvenience. "Because I don't want to lie about it. I figured you'd be mature enough to handle it." "Mature enough?" I nodded slowly, setting my glass down with deliberate care. "Right, mature enough." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're not going to make this dramatic, are you?" I almost laughed at the sheer arrogance of it. She wasn't asking for my permission. She was letting me know how little my opinion mattered. "No," I said, my voice even. "Not at all." She gave a small, approving smile, as if I had passed some kind of test. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." I watched her take another bite, her focus already shifting back to her phone, back to her world of high-stakes deals and power plays. She had no idea that something inside me had just snapped. That night, as she packed for her legal summit, I sat in my office, fingers hovering over my keyboard. I had spent years working as a private investigator before switching to freelance security consulting. Megan had always dismissed my job as unimportant, a side gig compared to her high-powered career. But she had forgotten one crucial detail. My expertise was in uncovering deception, and now I was going to turn my skills against her. I created a fake profile, using carefully selected stock photos, crafting a persona that was tailored to Megan's tastes. Wealthy, confident, successful. Someone who could give her the excitement she thought she deserved. I sent a message, and within minutes, she took the bait. As I watched her eagerly flirt with a man who didn't exist, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. And by the time she arrived in Chicago, she was going to learn just how wrong she had been. Megan left early the next morning, suitcase in hand, dressed in her usual business travel uniform. Sleek, professional, powerful. She barely looked at me as she checked her phone, probably texting colleagues, or more likely, the man she thought she would be meeting later. "I'll be back Sunday night," she said, distracted as she slung her bag over her shoulder. "Don't let Emma stay up too late." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Of course. Have a good trip." She barely acknowledged my words before walking out the door. The sound of her heels clicking against the pavement faded, followed by the distant hum of her car pulling out of the driveway. I stood there for a moment, absorbing the silence. And then I got to work. The fake profile I had created had done its job perfectly. Megan had taken the bait within minutes of our first exchange, her messages going from cautious to flirtatious in record time. I had studied her patterns, her interests, even the way she worded her texts. It was disturbingly easy to manipulate her, to feed her exactly what she wanted to hear. I watched as she texted him from the airport. "Megan, just boarded. Can't wait for this weekend." I smirked and replied, "Me, as Ryan, neither can I. I got something special planned for you." I didn't have to wait long for her response. "Megan, hope you don't disappoint. I like a man who knows how to keep things interesting." She had no idea. By the time she landed in Chicago, I had already reserved the penthouse suite at a luxury hotel under Ryan's name. I wanted her to believe she was walking into the most exciting night of her life. I wanted her to think she had played her cards perfectly, that she was in full control. I spent the next few hours refining my plan, making sure every detail was airtight. I rerouted some of our joint funds into a private account. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be contested later, just securing what was rightfully mine. Megan had always handled the finances, but she had never expected me to fight back. By the afternoon, I was ready. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait. That evening, Megan texted Ryan again. Megan, just finished dinner. What's the plan? I responded immediately. Me. As Ryan meet me at the penthouse. Room 2701. I have a surprise for you. She took the bait without hesitation. Megan, can't wait. Neither could I. As the night stretched on, I imagined her getting ready, carefully selecting her outfit, looking in the mirror and seeing the woman she wanted to be, untouchable, desired, in control. She thought she had orchestrated this weekend perfectly, that she had managed to deceive her husband while indulging in something thrilling, something new. But the real game was mine. At exactly 10:30 p.m., I received the notification from the hotel's lobby cameras. Megan had arrived. She stepped into the elevator, adjusting her hair, anticipation in every movement. I poured myself a drink and sat at the table waiting. The moment she opened the door and saw me instead of her fantasy, the entire world she had built for herself would come crashing down, and I would be the one to watch it happen. Megan stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against the polished floor of the penthouse hallway. The cameras I had access to caught everything. Her pausing to check her reflection in the mirror, smoothing her dress, taking a steadying breath before she knocked. She thought she was about to walk into the most exhilarating night of her life. Instead, she was walking straight into her own destruction. I took my time answering the door. I wanted her to feel that brief moment of anticipation, that rush of excitement before the floor dropped out from under her. When I finally turned the handle and pulled the door open, the moment stretched in slow motion. Her confident smile froze, her eyes widening as she processed what she was seeing. Me, sitting at the dining table, pouring myself a glass of bourbon, completely calm, completely in control. For a full second, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she stepped inside, her posture stiff. What are you doing here? I took a sip of my drink before answering. Surprise. I catfished my own wife. Her face drained of color. What? I gestured to the chair across from me. Close the door, Megan. Have a seat. She hesitated. Her fingers twitched toward her purse, as if she was debating running. But there was nowhere to run. The seconds dragged on, the weight of the moment suffocating. Then, cautiously, she closed the door and stepped inside, lowering herself into the chair like she was sitting across from a loaded gun. I slid my phone across the table toward her. Go ahead. Read. Her hands shook as she picked it up. The screen was already open to the text thread. Every message she had sent Ryan, every flirtation, every plan, all laid out for her to see. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Ethan, I know. I cut in smoothly, setting my glass down with a sharp clink. No explanations. No excuses. No lies. She inhaled sharply, but I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, setting it between us. Divorce papers. She flinched as if I had physically struck her. Ethan, please don't beg Megan, I said, my voice cold. You don't get to humiliate me, betray me, and then beg me to pretend it never happened. Her breathing was shallow, her fingers gripping the edges of the table. I leaned forward slightly. You never what? I asked, tilting my head. You never actually cheated? You never physically touched him? I scoffed, shaking my head. You don't get credit for that. You wanted to. You planned to. I tapped the phone screen. That was enough. Tears welled in her eyes, but I had seen her manipulate emotions before. She was a lawyer. Words were her weapons, emotions her tools. So I hit her where it hurt. I moved all our money into my personal account, I said, leaning back in my chair. Have fun paying for this trip alone. Her breath hitched. For the first time, real panic flickered across her face. You what? I sipped my drink completely at ease. You didn't think I let you keep access to our money, did you? She looked down at the divorce papers, as if just now realizing how deep this went. Her lips trembled. Ethan, we can fix this. I messed up, okay? But you don't have to. I let out a quiet laugh. Fix what? Our marriage? The one where you treat me like a backup plan? The one where you humiliate me in front of our friends and talk down to me like I'm beneath you? I shook my head. No, Megan, we're past fixing. Her hands curled into fists. I was bored, Ethan, she snapped suddenly, her voice raw with frustration. I needed excitement. I needed to feel alive again. And I thought I could have that without losing everything. I stared at her, letting her words hang between us. Then I smiled. Well, I said, standing up and adjusting my jacket. Looks like you miscalculated. I grabbed the folder, sliding it closer to her. Signed the papers. Her chin trembled, her eyes searching mine for any sign of weakness, any hesitation she could exploit. But there was none. She knew. She had already lost. Tears finally spilled over as she picked up the pen with shaky fingers. And with a sharp, unsteady breath, she signed her name. I exhaled slowly, taking the folder back and tucking into my bag. Then, without another word, I walked out, leaving her sitting alone in the penthouse she had thought would be the scene of her grand affair. She never even got the chance to cheat, because she was already destroyed. I stepped out of the penthouse, breathing in the crisp Chicago night air, the weight of the moment settling over me. Megan was still inside, sitting in stunned silence, staring at the divorce papers she had just signed. There had been no dramatic outbursts, no desperate pleas to fix things. Just shock and fear. She hadn't expected me to fight back. For years, she had assumed I would always be the quiet, dependable husband, the one who put up with everything, who took the insults and neglect in silence. But she had made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated me. As I walked down the street toward my hotel, I felt the coldness in my chest harden into something else. Resolve. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about making sure that when she walked away, she would know exactly what she had lost. I checked my phone, scrolling through the financial records one last time. The money was secure. I had moved every dollar that was rightfully mine into an account she couldn't touch. The only funds left in our shared accounts were just enough to cover basic bills. Nothing more. She had spent years treating me like I was insignificant, like I was just an accessory to her success. Now, she would have to learn what life was like without me holding everything together in the background. The next morning, while Megan was still recovering from the shock of the night before, I made my final moves. First, I contacted our lawyer. She signed, I said simply, placing the folder on the desk. Vanessa, my attorney, flipped through the pages, nodding in approval. That was fast. I exhaled. She didn't have a choice. Vanessa smirked. I take it you didn't give her one? Not really. She scanned the documents. She waved spousal support. Smart. She could have fought for it, but given the circumstances, a judge wouldn't have been kind to her. I nodded. Megan wasn't stupid. She knew dragging this into court would only expose more of her lies. Vanessa tapped the papers. So what's next for you? I thought about it for a moment. Moving forward. Good answer. She slid the paperwork into a file. I'll handle the final steps. You just focus on starting fresh. Starting fresh. It sounded simple, but I knew it wouldn't be. After leaving the law office, I took care of the rest of the details. I secured a new apartment, something smaller but modern, something mine. I set up a custody schedule for Emma that ensured she would have as much stability as possible. And I made sure Megan's credit card, which had always been attached to our joint account, was now completely disconnected from my finances. By the time I got back to my hotel, I had done everything I needed to. And then Megan called. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. Then, finally, I swiped to accept the call. Her voice was quiet, unsure. Ethan. I didn't respond. She let out a shaky breath. I saw the bank records. I waited. You moved everything, she whispered. Yes, I said simply. A long pause. Then a small, bitter laugh. You planned this from the start, didn't you? I leaned back against the wall, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. You gave me no choice. I was honest with you. She snapped suddenly, the edge creeping back in her voice. I didn't hide anything. I could have gone behind your back, but I told you. I laughed coldly. You told me? You mean you sat across from me at dinner and announced you were going to cheat? Like it was a business decision? And you think that's honesty? She was silent. I continued. You didn't respect me enough to even lie about it, Megan. That's how little I meant to you. I could hear her breathing, uneven, strained. I messed up, she finally admitted. I don't know why I did it, but I did. And now you've taken everything from me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words settle. Then I opened them, my voice calm. No, Megan, You did that. Silence stretched between us. You're really leaving? She whispered. Yeah, I said. I am. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't wait for her to. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the bed, exhaling slowly. This was it. The moment I finally stepped away from the woman who had spent years making me feel like I was never enough. The moment I took back my life. And for the first time in years, I felt like me again. The morning after I hung up on Megan, I woke up feeling nothing. No regret. No second-guessing. No anger even. Just a quiet, steady sense of certainty. I had done what needed to be done, and there was no going back. The divorce was moving forward. The finances were secured. The custody agreement for Emma was in progress. And Megan? She was finally facing the consequences of her own arrogance. Still, I knew her well enough to expect another attempt at control. It didn't take long. That afternoon, while I was packing up the last of my things at the house, my phone buzzed. Megan, I need to see you. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Me? There's nothing to talk about. Her response came immediately. Megan, please. Just one conversation. No fighting. Just talk. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders, already knowing what this was. Damage control. She wasn't sorry. She just wanted to see if she could twist things in her favor. I should have ignored her. Instead, I replied, Me, fine. 1 hour. At the house. When she arrived, she hesitated in the doorway, looking around the half-empty living room. Her eyes flickered over the missing furniture, the boxes, the visible proof that I was truly leaving. You're really doing this, she murmured, almost to herself. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Yeah. She let out a shaky breath, stepping inside. Ethan, I held up a hand. No lies. No manipulation. Say what you need to say. She pressed her lips together, nodding before finally speaking. I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Which part? Telling me you were going to cheat? Or thinking I was too weak to do anything about it? Her face twisted slightly, guilt flickering behind her eyes. I don't know why I did it, she said softly. I don't know. I convinced myself it wouldn't matter. That it was just one night, that wouldn't change anything. I scoffed. It did change things, Megan. It showed me exactly how little I meant to you. She swallowed, looking away. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head. But you did. And you didn't care. Not when you planned it. Not when you messaged him. Not when you packed your bag, thinking you were about to have the time of your life. You only care now because you lost. Her hands clenched into fists. I lost everything, she whispered, her voice tight. My marriage. My security. My dignity. Everything. I studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. That was your choice. Her jaw tightened. It's so easy for you, isn't it? She snapped suddenly, her voice laced with frustration. Walking away like I meant nothing to you. Something cold settled in my chest. You didn't mean something to me, I said quietly. For years, I put up with the way you treated me because I loved you. Because I thought, maybe deep down you still cared. But now, I exhaled slowly. Now I don't even know you. Her eyes flashed, her emotions shifting from guilt to anger. So that's it? You get to act like you were the perfect husband, and I was just some evil villain? You never fought for us, Ethan. I laughed, shaking my head. I spent years fighting for us. For you. I defended you when people called you cold. I covered for you when you missed Emma's recitals. I let you treat me like an afterthought, convincing myself that I just needed to be patient. That one day, you'd see me again. I leaned in slightly, voice steady. But you never did. And the second you decided you wanted something exciting, you didn't hesitate to throw me away. Her breathing was uneven now. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I tilted my head. That was your mistake. Silence stretched between us. Then, her voice cracked. Can't we fix this? I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Megan. No, we can't. Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded, pressing her hands against her face. I deserve this, she whispered. I didn't argue. Instead, I stepped forward and placed the finalized divorce agreement on the table. Sign it, I said. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, finally, she picked up the pen. Her signature was shaky, but it was done. I picked up the papers, tucked them into my bag, and turned to leave. Megan didn't stop me. She just stood there, shoulders slumped, watching as I walked away. Walking away from Megan should have felt like an ending, but in reality, it was a beginning. The moment I left that house, the weight I'd carried for years finally lifted. The suffocating doubt, the constant need to prove myself, the endless cycle of bending over backward for someone who never appreciated me. It was gone. I moved into my new apartment the next day, a modest two-bedroom that felt empty but light. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was freeing. I didn't have to brace myself for condescending remarks. I didn't have to tiptoe around a woman who saw me as an inconvenience rather than a partner. I could just exist in my own space on my own terms. That first night, I sat on the couch with a beer in hand, staring at the half-unpacked boxes scattered around me. The television was on, but I wasn't really watching. I was just there in the quiet, realizing that I wasn't waiting anymore. Waiting for her to change. Waiting for things to get better. Waiting for the life I had built around her to start making sense. The next few weeks were a blur of legal formalities, custody arrangements, and tying up loose ends. Megan didn't fight the divorce. She knew she had no ground to stand on, and she wasn't in a position to make demands. The money was already secured. The accounts were untangled. The house would be sold, and whatever she got out of it wouldn't be my concern. I met with my lawyer, Vanessa, to finalize everything. She glanced at the papers and nodded approvingly. "You're officially free, Ethan," she said, tapping the final document. "No alimony, no financial ties, full control of your assets. You handled this well." I exhaled. "Thanks." She studied me for a moment. Most people hesitate at this stage. They second-guess, have doubts. "You don't seem like you do." I met her gaze. "Because I don't." She smirked. "Good. You deserve to move on without baggage." And I did. But Megan wasn't doing as well. I heard through mutual friends that things had unraveled fast for her. Losing access to our joint finances had hit her hard. She had been so used to controlling everything that the sudden loss of power had left her scrambling. She had tried to keep up appearances at work, but it didn't take long for the cracks to show. People whispered about what had happened in Chicago, how she had gone there expecting an affair and ended up blindsided instead. Her reputation as a sharp, composed lawyer was starting to slip. Then, she made a mistake. She called me. It was a Friday night, a full month since I had left. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what she had to say. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Megan." She let out a breath. "Hey." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. "How are you?" I exhaled through my nose. "I'm fine." More silence. Then, hesitantly, "I miss you." I closed my eyes for a brief second, then opened them. "What do you want, Megan?" She swallowed audibly. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be without you." I scoffed. "You didn't seem to have a problem when you were planning to cheat." Her breath hitched. "I wasn't thinking." "No," I interrupted. "You were thinking just fine. You made a choice, and now you have to live with it." She went quiet. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I hate this." I tilted my head. "You hate what exactly? The consequences? The fact that you don't have control anymore?" She hesitated. "I hate that I ruined everything." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing a hand over my face. "No, Megan, you didn't ruin everything. You just ruined us." Her breathing was shaky now. "I thought you'd come back," she whispered. "That once the anger faded, you'd see that we could fix this." I let out a quiet laugh. "Megan, the anger faded a long time ago. What's left is the realization that I was never coming back." Silence. Then, in a broken voice, "Do you hate me?" I sighed, staring at the ceiling. "No, Megan, I don't hate you." "Then why won't you give me another chance?" I smiled sadly. "Because I don't love you either." The line went silent. I let her sit with that truth for a moment before finishing. "You were my whole world once. But the second you decided I wasn't enough, you stopped being mine." She sniffed. "I don't know how to do this without you." I closed my eyes. "You're going to have to learn." I hung up, and I didn't answer when she called again. That night, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling something I hadn't in years. Peace. Megan had been my past. But my future? That was mine, and mine alone. Finalizing a divorce wasn't just about signing papers. It was about untangling a life I had spent years weaving together with someone I no longer recognized. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself that Megan had chipped away bit by bit until I had become a man who tolerated disrespect like it was love. But not anymore. I walked into Vanessa's office, the divorce papers finalized and stacked neatly on her desk. She gave me a knowing look, tapping the folder. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially free." I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't relief. It was just space, the kind I hadn't realized I needed. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. Megan didn't contest anything. No fight over assets. No push for spousal support. "She knows she wouldn't win," I said simply. Vanessa smirked. "True, but I think it's more than that. I think she knows she lost the only thing that actually mattered." I didn't respond. I wasn't here to analyze Megan's regrets. "What about custody?" I asked instead. Vanessa's expression turned serious. "You have primary custody of Emma. Megan gets visitation, but only under agreed terms. If she tries anything, we take it back to court, and given the evidence we have, it won't go well for her." I nodded. That was all I cared about. Emma deserved stability, and Megan wasn't in any position to provide it. As I stood to leave, Vanessa tilted her head. "You're handling this better than most." I gave a small, humorless laugh. I've been preparing for this for a long time. And that was the truth. 2 days later, Megan sent a text. "Megan, I need to see Emma." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. "Me, follow the custody agreement." The reply came almost instantly. "Megan, Ethan, don't do this. She's my daughter too." "Me, and where was that concern when you were planning your affair?" No response. I knew Megan didn't want to see Emma out of love. She wanted something stable in her life, something to hold on to while everything else spiraled. But I wasn't going to let my daughter be a lifeline for a woman who had already abandoned her family once. The next morning, I met with Emma's teachers to go over her school plan. I made sure she had everything she needed: new books, activities, a structured routine. I had been the one raising her for years while Megan had been too busy with her career, but now I could do it without wondering if I was enough. That evening, I cooked dinner for us, just the two of us in our new apartment. Emma looked up at me between bites of spaghetti. "Daddy, are we happy now?" I swallowed, setting my fork down. "Yeah, sweetheart, we are." She smiled, kicking her feet under the table. "Good." And just like that, I knew I had made the right choice. Megan had spent years making me feel like I was losing something. But as I sat across from my daughter, watching her laugh, I realized something important. I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything. The first morning in my fully unpacked apartment, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window. No alarm, no tension in my chest, no waiting for an argument to ruin the day before it even began. Just peace. I sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand over my face, letting the quiet settle around me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with the weight of Megan's expectations pressing down on me. I wasn't bracing for another remark about how I wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't doing enough, wasn't enough. I was just me. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window, watching the city come to life below. The apartment wasn't big, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed picture of Emma, every carefully chosen detail. It was the first place I had built for myself, not for someone else. And that meant something. Later that day, I picked Emma up from school. She climbed in the car, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and grinned up at me. "Daddy, guess what?" I smiled. "What?" She bounced in her seat. "I made a new friend. Her name is Lily, and she likes dinosaurs and sparkles." I chuckled, pulling away from the school parking lot. "That's a solid combination." She said I can come over to her house sometime, Emma said, swinging her legs. "But I told her I just moved, so she has to come here first." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You like the new place?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It's cozy, and you let me have pancakes for dinner. Mommy never did that." I smiled, but there was a small pang in my chest. I had always been the one taking care of her, the one who made sure she felt safe and loved. But Megan had spent so much time climbing her career ladder that she had missed the simple joys, the bedtime stories, the silly inside jokes, the little moments that made parenting more than just a responsibility. And she would never get those moments back. That night, after I put him to bed, I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen. My freelance work had been steady, but I wanted more. Not for money, not for status, but for me. For years, I had let my career take a back seat to Megan's. Now, I had the chance to build something of my own. I sent out a few emails, reached out to old contacts, and by the end of the night, I had 3 potential job offers waiting for me. Progress. The next day, I got a text from Megan. "Megan, can we talk?" I sighed, staring at the message. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then I typed back, "Me about what?" Her response came quickly. "Megan, us." I exhaled through my nose. "Me. There's no us anymore." This time, it took her a while to reply. "Megan, I know, but I still don't understand how we got here." I frowned, fingers hovering over the screen. "Me. You don't understand? You chose this." "Megan, I made a mistake." I shook my head. No, Megan. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something in anger and regretting it. What you did, that was calculated. Silence. Then, "Megan, I wasn't happy." I let out a bitter laugh. "Me. And your solution was to cheat?" "Megan, I didn't cheat." I clenched my jaw. "Me. The intent was enough. The second you decided I wasn't enough, our marriage was already over." Her reply took longer this time. "Megan, I miss you." I ran a hand over my face. "Me. You miss control. Not me." And with that, I ended the conversation. The next week, I got an official job offer. A well-paying cybersecurity position that would give me stability and flexibility for Emma. The week after that, I closed on the sale of the house Megan and I had once shared. By the end of the month, I had everything in place. A steady job, a home I loved, a daughter who knew, without a doubt, that she was my world. Megan, meanwhile, was still trying to figure out what to do now that her safety net was gone. I heard through a mutual friend that she had been struggling at work, that the rumors about Chicago had made their way into the corporate world, tainting her reputation, that she was barely holding on. But that wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, Emma sat beside me on the couch, flipping through a book. She looked up suddenly. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. Are you happy?" I blinked. No one had asked me that in a long time. I thought about it. About the apartment, the job, the peaceful mornings, the laughter-filled nights with my daughter. About how, for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval. Then I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." And I meant it. Megan always believed she was untouchable. She built her world on control, on being the smartest, the most successful, the one who called the shots. And for years, I let her believe it. I let her believe she was better than me, that I was just there, orbiting around her ambition. Now, she was watching that world collapse in real time. I didn't check in on her. I didn't need to. People talked. Mutual friends, old colleagues, even casual acquaintances who had once admired her now whispered about how the great Megan had fallen. Her career had taken a serious hit. She hadn't been fired, but she had been quietly pushed to the sidelines, excluded from major cases, left out of key meetings. The firm wasn't going to risk their reputation on someone whose personal life had become office gossip. It turned out that her reputation, the one she valued more than anything, wasn't as bulletproof as she thought. I wasn't celebrating her downfall. That wasn't the point of all this. But there was something satisfying about knowing that, for once, she was facing the consequences of her own actions. The cracks in her perfect image spread quickly. I found out from a mutual acquaintance that Ryan, the man she had thought she was meeting in Chicago, had distanced himself the moment everything went public. He wasn't about to risk his own reputation for a woman whose name was now associated with scandal. Megan had always been selective about the people in her life, surrounding herself with those who benefited her. But now, those same people were stepping back, keeping their distance, realizing that being close to her was no longer an advantage. She was alone. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward. My new job had officially started, and for the first time in years, I actually enjoyed my work. I wasn't just doing it to keep things stable for Megan. I wasn't just filling the space between parenting duties. I was building something. Emma thrived. She loved the new apartment, loved our new routines, loved the stability that came from knowing I was there for her always. One evening, while we were making dinner together, she looked up at me and grinned. "Daddy." I glanced down, stirring the pasta. "Yes, sweetheart. I like it when it's just us," she said simply. "It's fun." I swallowed, feeling something tighten in my chest. "Me too, kiddo." And I meant it. A few days later, Megan texted again. "Megan, can we meet?" I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Me, why?" Her response was immediate. "Megan, please, Ethan. Just once." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I had any lingering feelings, but because I knew Megan. She wouldn't stop until she had one final attempt at control.